So before I begin this morning, I love little stories. I grew up in a preacher's family, grandfather preacher, on and on. That's all I've ever known and seen. But I love these little preacher stories. So I'm going to share a little. Is it okay if I share just a preacher story to begin? Okay. So this is a little story about a preacher that had the reputation of very lengthy sermons. You're not just going extra innings, sometimes 2 innings, 3 innings, and just on and on and on. So this one particular week, after an exceptionally long sermon, he's standing at the back door. Parishioners are there, they're going out and they're saying hi to the pastor. And so one of the parishioners comes up and shakes the hand of the preacher, and he says, he looks up at the preacher, as a preacher, would you like to hear my definition of a good sermon? Well, I can tell you, it'd be a little awkward if the preacher were to say no. So he looks back and he says, sure, go ahead. What is your definition of a good sermon? So the church member looks back and he says, well, preacher, it's really very, very simple. So for a good sermon, you have a good beginning and a good ending, and then you keep those two as close together as possible. So based on that definition, we'll kind of work off of that a little bit here this morning. So listen, I invite you to just open your scriptures to not to the gospel, but to Daniel chapter 3. And I'm going to share with you a little bit later the reason why I have chosen this chapter. It is one that's very, very familiar. So it tumbles off the hill of Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, of course, is that the dream of that huge image. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar was declared, listen, you are the head of gold. So I guess the king gets all excited. And in chapter 3, the very next chapter, he decides, hey, listen, head of gold's not good enough for me. I'm just going to do a whole full body image of gold. So in light of this little story I just told you about the preacher, I've just decided, originally I was just going to say, hey, listen, why don't we just read it? It's just an entire chapter. We'll just read it and relive this story together. But instead of reading it, you can track along. Just open your Bible to Daniel chapter 3. You can track along. I'm just going to go ahead and just refresh it. I'm going to tell this story, retell this story, okay? Very, very familiar. So, here's Nebuchadnezzar. He's got this huge, there's been all kinds of estimates how tall it is, but just this massive, massive replica of him in gold. And of course, everybody shows up. Everybody's invited, not just the people of his own kingdom, but all the VIPs. Anybody, you got the media there. Good Morning Babylon is there. Everybody is there, all right? In fact, it's not just an option, it's required. You're going to be here. And so, of course, the instructions, go out. The whole idea is Nebuchadnezzar is you're going to bow down to this image. And so the instructions are given very clear. You hear the music, down you go. You bow to the image. So we know what's going to happen next. The music plays. All of a sudden, there's a thump. Everybody's on their face. A cloud of dust. But then when the dust settles, there are 3 standing. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, very, very familiar names to you and to me. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the word goes back to the king. Oh, king, we got a problem here. Everybody's bowed. These 3 guys. King says, okay, bring them in. So now they're standing in front of the king, and the king says, listen, guys, I know who you are. You're part of my government. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here. I'm just going to assume that maybe you didn't understand the instructions clearly, so you're going to get a second chance here. When you hear the music, you bow. If you don't bow, you're going to burn. There's the fiery furnace. Do you get it? And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bless their hearts, they said, King, live forever. But you can play the music all day long. We don't necessarily need a second chance. We didn't miss the first instruction. We heard it clearly. Play your music. We're not going to bow. King is furious. The Bible's very clear. He's absolutely. Who's going to defy him? Especially, it's embarrassing. You got the media there. You got your whole kingdom is there watching this thing, and he's not going to be humiliated. So he said, "Okay, toss him into the fiery furnace. Just toss him in." So they do toss him in. Of course, the king, he's got the best seat in the house, and he's watching this thing, and all of a sudden he goes, "Oh, good now. What in the world is going on?" I mean, help me understand this. Didn't we toss in 3? How come I see 4? He says, no, king, you're not imagining things. There's 4. And the king comes to the sense and says, well, listen, that's going to be nothing but, the God of the universe himself. So he calls out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And basically the way it ends is he acknowledges the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the God of all gods. That's the story in about 2 minutes. So what I want to do is I'm going to share with you here this morning 4 very brief life applications from the story in Daniel chapter 3, okay? 4, and then a little bit of a surprise at the end as to why I'm sharing Daniel chapter 3 here today. First application is this. Number 1, don't give in to peer pressure. So this is coming from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the story of Daniel chapter 3. The first life application is very simple. All 4 of them are very simple. You may want to jot these down. Number 1, don't give in to peer pressure. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they didn't bow, they didn't bend. But here's the key. They had already predetermined. See, this is the aspect that is so critical for us today. They had already predetermined in their hearts that they would be faithful to Yahweh God no matter what. It's not as if they're on the plains of Dura and all of a sudden the music plays and everybody bows and they look at each other and say, whoa, 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 should we, let's think about this for just a moment. There was they did not have to have a little committee. They didn't have to have a discussion. They didn't have to say, listen, I got to get back home. I got to read some scripture just to make sure that what I should be doing. No, they had already predetermined it, regardless of all the peer pressure, even at the threat of death, they had already determined in their hearts that they would be faithful to God no matter what. Listen, my friends, if you wait to make that decision when you're facing a crisis like that until the fire is warming your face, it's too late. That's not the time to be debating among yourselves, well, I wonder, what should I be doing here? It should already be determined. Do you remember Joseph, right? When Joseph was tempted by Pharaoh's wife, it wasn't as if he was in that room and saying, well, what really should I do here? He already knew. It was just a reaction. I'm not going to do this great wickedness and sin against God. I'm out of here. He had already determined. So you get this, right? Don't wait until the fire is warming your face to decide whether or not you're going to be faithful and true to God. That's a determination that you make long beforehand. That's the reason why Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego can stand there before the king and say, listen, king, live forever. We're not going to bow down and worship you. Our God, who is the God of Yahweh, he can save us. But if he does not, we're still going to be faithful to him. Listen, my friends, if you're going to dare to be a Daniel or Shadrach, Meshach, or Abednego, if you're going to be one that's going to be willing to stand no matter what crisis comes, no matter what the threat might be, even death, there's this already predetermined choice to be faithful to God no matter what. I read these stories and my mind I visualize stuff. So there's times that and this is, look, Daniel has some of the greatest stories in all the books of the Bible. You got to love the stories of Daniel. I mean, please, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fiery furnace, Daniel in a lion's den. I mean, they're just all the way through these just amazing stories. But just let your mind place yourself in the story and just try to imagine. Have you ever stopped to think about what the conversation must have been between Jesus and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? While they're in the fiery furnace, they're just walking, they're not being consumed by the flames. Jesus is right there with them. Can you imagine don't you think that Jesus must have said something about how proud he was of them, of their courage and conviction? Don't you think as they were all just kind of mingling there together, just huddled together, that Jesus must have reminded them of their faithfulness to him? Do you think that Jesus informed them that literally hundreds and thousands of years that people would still be talking about them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because of their faithfulness to him there that day? I mean, here we are. It's 2025. We're still talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Do you think that perhaps he informed them that for centuries to come, their story of their faithfulness, that all around the world there will be men and women who would face suffering, they would face persecution, and they would face possibly even death. But how their lives would be strengthened because of the stand that they took there that day. Oh man, amazing. You know, we tend to think, well, peer pressures for teenagers. No, that's not true. You should know that by now. There's peer pressure everywhere. Peer pressure in families, peer pressure at work, peer pressure everywhere. The only time you're going to not have peer pressure in your life is when you hit 100 years old, because you will have outlived everybody. No more peer pressure then. But until then, there's always peer pressure, always. Don't bow or bend. That's the first life application. Do not bow or bend to peer pressure. That's number one. Second application. Here it is. Sometimes God delivers in the furnace. Sometimes God delivers in the furnace. Listen, do you realize that it was in the furnace that they met God? Sometimes God delivers in the furnace, but sometimes God delivers from the furnace. It's his choice. Sometimes God will say, okay, I'm going to deliver you from this furnace. Sometimes God says, you know what? I'm going to meet you in the furnace. I'm not going to deliver you from this one, but rest assured, I'm going to meet you in the furnace. So I have a little quiz for you. By the way, this is not a trick quiz. I'm not trying to catch you with anything, all right? You should all pass this quiz. It's very, very simple. Here's the quiz, just a number of quick questions. How many were thrown into the fiery furnace? How many? 3. How many were seen walking around in the fiery furnace? How many were seen walking out of the fiery furnace? So where's the 4th? Where's the 4th? You see, I would suggest to you, based on this story, that the 4th one is still in the furnace. The 4th one, none other than the pre-incarnate Christ himself, was in that fiery furnace. So whatever furnace in life that you are going through, either now or in the future, just rest assured, Jesus is in that furnace with you. Because you see, sometimes God delivers us from that furnace, but there are other times that he says, no, you're going to go through this furnace, but rest assured, I'll be in that furnace there with you, just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Jesus will be with you in whatever fire you experience in your life. Okay, that's application number 2. All right, here it is. So this is just from that little story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. 3 little life applications. Number 3, remember and reflect on God's deliverances in your life. Now, we've all had these. If you were to just pause, think back in your life, experience and journey, you can think back and realize, you can see very tangible evidence that God was there, that God was leading in your life. He didn't deliver you from, but he was there with you in the midst of it. You can see that. You see, I would suggest to you from the story that it's important to remember and reflect on God's deliverances in your life. Now, again, this is where my imagination takes me. I want you to imagine now, years have gone by, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Let's just say they're in retirement, all right? Whatever retirement was back in those days. Let's just say they're retired. They're let's just say advanced in years. And let's just say that every anniversary of being tossed into the fiery furnace, they get together. But now they're much older in life. Time has passed, but they're still getting together. I just imagine that when they get together every anniversary, they go into the closet and pull out those old robes. Now, these would be the robes that their wives have been trying to get them to get rid of for years by now. I mean, first of all, they're completely out of style. Nobody wears this anymore. They probably have holes in them, and they don't fit. It's way too tight. Some of you experienced that? I have. Clothes that I keep around, I'll pull them out and say, boy, there's just something wrong here. They've either shrunk or something else has happened. But here's Shadrach, Meshach, they've got their old robes on, and they're sitting around and they're retelling the story. You know how it is for those of you that, let's just say you're a little bit closer to my age, where it's kind of fun where you've had shared experiences with either a family member or friends or whatever. It's just, you get together and you talk about a shared experience that happened previously. Now, none of us have had a shared experience quite like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but can you imagine when they would sit there and they start talking about, hey guys, do you remember when we were young? We were so full of courage. We had all this. Do you remember how we actually stood in front of Nebuchadnezzar and defied him? Do you remember this, guys? Do you remember how they actually tossed us into that furnace and we thought, oh man, it's lights out, it's all over. But all of a sudden we realized, man, this isn't painful. I'm not feeling anything. And all of a sudden, we look around. Do you remember that moment when you peered into the face of that fourth person and realized, listen, this has got to be Jesus himself. It's the face of an angel, pre-incarnate. Do you remember that, guys? I have a feeling not a year would go by after Shadrach, Meshach, and they had this, and they would get together and they would just share and they would recall and remember that. You see, going into the furnace was probably the greatest fear in their lives. Who wants to be tossed into that? But it ended up being the greatest experience of their lives. And ironically, this is ironic. Being tossed into the fiery furnace actually ended up being the safest place they could ever be. Right there in those flames was none other than Jesus himself. What they assumed was going to be death ended up being the safest of all. Why? Because God was there. Jesus was there. You see, sometimes he will save us from the furnace, but sometimes he says, you know what? I'm going to meet you. I will meet you in the furnace. Okay, here's the fourth life application. Here it is. Number 4. Simply this. God's divine appointment for you. That's number 4. God's divine appointment for you. Okay, so this is again where you got to let the imagination just run a little wild, okay? So I want you to imagine heaven, and that heaven has this massive calendar, all right? A calendar that just covers centuries. Now, look, you need to understand that I understand that, look, God is omniscient. He's omnipresent. He doesn't need a calendar because he doesn't need to be reminded of where to be because he's already there, all right? He's God. But just for illustration's sake, let's just say that in heaven, there's this massive calendar. And let's just say hundreds of years before Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, God had written in the calendar, meet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. Let's just say it was in the calendar. Let's just say that day arrives and God looks at, whoa, I got to be down there with Shadrach, Meshach. Let's just say that God showed up, but Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't. They missed it. They bowed. They acquiesced. What if they hadn't shown up? I mean, their whole lives depended on that one decision, their willingness to face the furnace. I'll meet you in the furnace. You see, they didn't miss that appointment. They stayed faithful. God was faithful, and they met in the furnace. But can I just remind you of something here? Listen, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they've had their day. Daniel, he's had his day. Peter and Paul, they've had their day. Matthew, they've had their day. Just go down through history. You can talk about Martin Luther had his day. All these giants that have gone through time and history, they've had their day. Can I just remind you of something? This is our time now. We're the ones who are alive as followers of Christ in the year 2025. Listen, do you realize that God has a divine appointment for you as well? I have no idea what you're going to face in the future. I have no idea what I'm going to be facing in the future. But I, for one, determined not to miss that divine appointment with God. This is our day. This is our generation now. You don't need to look this up, but I love this promise in Isaiah chapter 43. This is chapter 43, verses 2 and 3. It simply says this, when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze, for I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. Very next verse. I love this line. Since you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you. Would you notice very clearly in this verse, there's nowhere in this verse where it promises that God is going to keep you or me out of the fire. In fact, it doesn't even say if the fire. Do you know what it says specifically? It says when the fire. When the fire. When you walk through the fire, I will be there. I don't know what kind of a furnace perhaps even right now, there's a furnace how you just find yourself right smack dab. And the furnace, look, this is the year 2020. It could be anything. It could be your health that you're dealing with, or a family issue that you're dealing with, or a work-related issue, or relational furnaces. Look, we live on a planet that is so fragile and broken. We deal with furnaces all the time. All the time. But so this is what I want to just remind you of here today, based upon Daniel chapter 3. Whatever furnace that you find yourself right smack dab in the middle today, just rest assured, Jesus is there with you. Jesus is there with you. He's the one that has promised, I will be there with you in the fire. He's the one that said, fear not, though you pass through the flames, they will not burn you. They will not destroy you. I will meet you in the furnace. So I really appreciate, the scripture reading that was read a little bit earlier in the. So you got to understand that 2 Timothy is one of my favorite chapters, and the reason is that these are literally the last words that the Apostle Paul writes. He's in Rome. Nero's about ready he's about ready to be a martyr. He's stuck in this little dungeon. Now, I've had the privilege of being in Rome on a couple of occasions, and they will take you to. So when we say prison, unfortunately, our Western mind think of Western prisons. All right, so Paul's in prison. Okay, we get it. He's got a television and he's being fed 3 meals a day, et cetera, et cetera. No. Even dungeon doesn't do this justice. He's deep into the ground. It's not just a pit. It's like they will let you go down inside. They know exactly where this is. This is part of history. They know where this is. So it is literally deep into the ground. So I remember I went down twice. The first time, I didn't take anything warm with me. I didn't really think about it. I didn't know how deep. But I got down there, and it was and this was late spring, and it was really chilly. You're looking. These are walls that have just literally been chiseled out of rock. So you're down there. It's dark, it's damp, it's very, very chilly. There's no light unless they were to have some sort of a candle or something like that. It's no wonder that Paul writes and he says, Timothy, bring my books, but bring a cloak. Why would he say that? It's cold. It's cold. So here's Paul, and he's in 2 Timothy. Literally, I mean, he's just written, I fought the good fight, I've kept the faith, I've finished the race. He's just written that. And then we come to the scripture that was read just a few moments ago. And these words take on new meaning, because I've been right where Paul was before he was beheaded. He's just written these words of, been faithful, et cetera, et cetera. Then in verse 17, he said, now remember, he's writing this in this chilly cold, fully aware that his life could be snuffed out at any time. And he writes and says, but the Lord stood with me and strengthened me. I mean, isn't that exactly what happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? The Lord stood with them in the fiery furnace, completely different than a cold, damp dungeon. But God's the same. God, I suppose, could have delivered Paul out of this furnace or this pit, but he didn't. With Paul, he said, no, Paul, just rest assured, I'm here with you. And Paul recognizes that, and he's writing out to young Timothy, and he says, listen, this is 5 verses before he's done. No more writings of Paul. This is a part of the last 5 verses he writes in his life. And a part of his testimony is, but the Lord stood with me, and the Lord strengthened me. When you look at the life of the Apostle Paul, was this somebody that had already predetermined and made a decision in his life that he was going to be faithful to God? Do you think he waited until he was getting thrown into this pit and say, whoa, let me think about this for just a moment? Was that Paul? You see, Paul had his day. This is our day. This is our day. And just as maybe God had in the calendar long before, okay, meet Paul in the dungeon. It's going to be dark and cold and damp in there. You meet him down in there. And now he's writing this, Jesus stood with me. He was there with me. He gave me courage. Listen, I don't know where in the heavenly calendar your name is written down for whatever it is that you and I are going to be going through. But if Jesus was there for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, if Jesus is there for the Apostle Paul, don't you think he's going to be there for you? You and I cannot afford to miss that greatest manifestation of Jesus in our lives whenever that comes, or however that comes. So I do have an ending, but I'm going to give you something a little bit, just because I know I got a couple more minutes. I'm going to give you something a little bit different than I may have usually, just because of where we are in history, okay? So I'm going to be very, very careful how I'm going to say this, because this is not about a person, this is about a power, okay? So some of the Adventists, we are very much into eschatology, last day events, et cetera, which is fine. We were birthed on all of that. So this is just a part of our DNA. We think about these things. We study these things. We anticipate these. We read the headlines, trying to understand, where we are in the course of history. So here recently, there was a new pope that was elected. You're aware of this, right? The white smoke, we have a new pope, all right? What I'm going to share with you next is not about the pope. It's about a power. Because you see, whenever I read Daniel chapter 3, I always connect it with Revelation 13 and 14. It's a parallel story. It's just in Revelation is talking about the future. Daniel chapter 3 is reality. It happened. So Daniel chapter 3 is past. Revelation 13 and 14 is future. But you cannot read those 2 chapters, those 2 passages separately. They go together. Because in essence, what happened in Daniel chapter 3 is a precursor of what's going to happen in the future. Now listen, if you haven't read Revelation 13 and 14 recently, maybe that's a good thing to do this afternoon, okay? Just to have a better understanding of where we are. So what I want to share with you in closing, very quickly, because this has been very much on my mind, particularly in thinking about Daniel chapter 3, is whatever happened in Daniel chapter 3 that we have just reviewed is going to happen again, future. All right? I'm not talking about a person, I'm talking about a power. And if you want to look at this in more detail, go back, look at Daniel 13, 14. It is absolutely stunning, and spend some moments reflecting on it. Okay, I'm going to share with you 6, very, very quickly, 6 parallels between Daniel chapter 3, Revelation 13 and 14, future. All right, here they are, very quickly. Parallel number 1, Babylon rules the world. It was that way with the 3 Hebrew boys, and Babylon will rule the world in the end. Parallel number 2, the king of Babylon creates an image to honor himself. It was that way with Nebuchadnezzar, and it will be that way with this power in the end. Are you following me? Are you connecting some dots here as well? All right. Parallel number 3, he demands worship of himself. He demands it. It was that way then, and it will be that way just ahead. Parallel number 4, the penalty for refusal is the pain of death. You do it or else. It was that way for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and it will be that way for the generation at the end of time. Parallel number 5. Now this one you can tie in easily to Daniel chapter 3. All the world bows and worships the image. All the world bows and worships the image. All except a very small minority. Once again, that's just connecting Daniel chapter 3, which we just experienced, and Revelation 13 and 14, which is still future. And finally, number 6. Blamed by Babylon, they are thrown to their death. I've always, in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I really think my favorite part in all of that is when Shadrach, Meshach, they're thrown into the furnace, and the king says, well, okay, listen, I want a front row seat. So, he's brought all the way up right in front of the furnace, not too close, because of the heat, 7 times hotter. He's watching all this. He's just thinking they're going to be consumed at any minute. Whereas now these 3 guys are walking around, and, I have no idea if Nebuchadnezzar just turned as white as a sheet. You've heard that expression before. But, I've always tried to imagine what the look on his face must have been. He looks at the verse and he sees 4 now. Can you imagine what that must have been like? Did we make a mistake? It's supposed to be 3. What's going on with this 4th one? What's going on here? And all of a sudden, discovering in the end, it's nothing but God himself delivering his people. Yahweh God delivering his people. You see, this last parallel is once again Revelation 13, 14. In the future, same God delivering his people of this generation from that furnace. Whoa, I love that. There was a little hymn that came to mind. I actually have been going through the hymnal. And this is a hymn that I've always really liked. It's hymn number 482. But I was rereading the words to this. And I was reading these words and I was thinking, good night, whoever the author is. I wonder, when they wrote this, were they thinking of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? It's a familiar hymn. I'm going to read just 4 stanzas, but they're very, very short. Father, lead me day by day. Here it is. So you listen to these lines and see if you can picture Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in here. So here it is. Verse number 1. Father, lead me day by day, ever in thy own sweet way. Teach me to be pure and true. Show me what I ought to do. Verse 2. When in danger, make me brave. Make me know that thou canst save. Keep me safe by thy dear side. Let me in thy love abide. Number 3, when I'm tempted to do wrong, make me steadfast, wise, and strong. And when all alone I stand, shield me with thy mighty hand. May I do, this is the last, may I do the good I know, be thy loving child below, then at last go home to thee, evermore thy child to be. I love the words to that hymn. I'll leave you with this little story, all right? So this goes back to Desert Storm. Do you remember Desert Storm? So Desert Storm, this goes back quite a few years, Desert Storm. And there was a fighter pilot by the name of Robbie. So he'd flown mission after mission after mission after mission. He's just a fighter pilot, mission after mission. And all of a sudden he's called in and informed, hey, look, the war's almost over, you're going home. It happened just like that in an instant. I mean, he was flying a mission, lands, all of a sudden he's informed, you're going home. And so he quickly, grabs his stuff, stuffs in a bag. He's got a couple of others, fighter pilots there. All of a sudden, the next thing he knows is that they're literally flying back to the United States. That's how fast it happened. And as he's up in the air, he gets all excited. And he's thinking to himself, you know what? This is going to give me a chance I'm going to surprise my family. I mean, I hardly even know I'm coming back. So they're not going to know. No, I mean, they're not going to have any idea. And now he's just, on that long flight back home, he's just envisioning what it's going to be like. He's going to walk through those doors. He's got a couple of kids and a wife, and how surprised they're going to be when they see he's walking through the door. So he's just eagerly anticipating it. So the plane lands. It's still kind of early in the morning, like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. So he and a couple of other buddies, they get a vehicle and they start driving. Well, his hometown is the closest. So they're going to drop him off first. So they're just driving along. And finally, it's just kind of the early morning hours. And so they pull into town. The stuff starts looking very familiar. And the streets are familiar. Finally, they turn onto his street, where his home is. And they're driving along, and of course the driver is saying, okay, tell me when to stop. And so he says, okay, stop. This is my home. And so Robbie looks out the car window, and he notices that on the garage door, there's this huge banner. I mean, it's massive. It's the entire garage door. And across the banner are written these words, welcome home, Daddy. And he's saying to himself, how did they know? I mean, I barely knew. How did they know? So he turns to his buddy and says, did you contact my family and tell them that No, we haven't said a word. So he's thinking, how in the world did they know? So what I'm going to read to you next is what happens next. And this is in Robbie's own words. This is what he writes. He says, when I walked into the house, the kids, they're half dressed for school, screamed, Daddy, Daddy. Susan, my wife, came running down the hall. Oh boy, did she look terrific. Hair fixed, makeup on, crisp yellow dress. And he said, I began to ask her, how did you know? How did you know? How did you know? I didn't, she said through her tears of joy. I didn't. But once we knew the war was almost over, we knew that you'd be home one of these days, and we knew you'd try to surprise us. So we decided to be ready every single day. Oh, I mean, isn't that it? I mean, just go back to the story of Daniel chapter 3 and then Revelation 13:5. I mean, you do realize that the war is almost over, don't you? We all recognize and see this. So I guess the question then becomes, if the war is almost over, how shall we choose to live? Why don't we choose to live like this family? Why not choose to be ready every single day? And then when he comes, he comes. And there's no more furnaces. There's no more fires. There's no more divine appointments on a calendar. It is forever, fully, finally, with Jesus Christ, our Savior. I'm ready for that. How about you?